everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of the Rich Cheese Radio podcast. My name is Schmidt, and I'm joined, as always, by my amazing co-host. You guys know him. You love him. Brodinky. Bro, what's going on, my friend?
It's a great night. I actually just got back from dinner with a few of the people who I did that fundraiser back in October with, and we just had kind of a little celebration. Yeah, a little acknowledgement, a little celebration, and a little talk about maybe doing it again next year. So,
no way. Okay.
Yeah, the handler who was kind of involved with each one of us, just sort of give us a little congratulations, and then was just appreciative of each one of us bringing our own little piece of the pie to the table, and then just how we might be able to expand on that. So we talked about some stuff, and maybe I'll get started a little earlier next year and can do even better, which could be cool. How are things on your end?
Dude, they're going all right. I mean, as you know, year's kicking off full force. Everything's heading full steam ahead into 2022, so everything's going well. No complaints. Family's good. Recording another episode of the podcast. Life is good. So we're going to be talking watches.
Sounds great. And I think kind of piggybacking on last week is an idea of when we were talking about how YouTube is sort of a toxic place for watches. Yeah. And I'm not going to say YouTube is completely just like the worst place ever, but a big popular theme on YouTube, and it's just because of the popularity of the brand, is just when you go on there, everything is just Rolex. And understandably, right?
Yeah.
It's a popular brand. It's worth a lot of money. It's one of the biggest, most well-marketed names on earth. So you're going to have that, right? You're going to have that devotion, whether it's Nike, whether it's whatever, right?
Yeah, it's a household name.
Yes. So one thing that's always kind of, in the words of Pauly Shore, tweaked my melon, is this idea of sort of brand fanaticism, right? This unnecessary devotion to a brand name that maybe really doesn't mean anything to you. Like, there's not a two-way connection there. Like, you're obsessed with them and they have no idea who you are.
Okay. All right.
So I think it's something we're all a little guilty of, and it's something maybe to reflect on, in the idea that we all have a brand that we like. We all have a favorite, and you want them to do well. Right? If you have a favorite brand, you want them to succeed because you like their products. You want other people to see their products in the way you do, right? Whether it's a super popular one already, or one that's up and coming, or one that's completely off of the map, right? I mean, Amazon started at some point it's just a picture of Bezos in a closet with a sign on the wall that says Amazon.com.
Yeah, the good old taste.
Yeah, not saying he's maybe a brand that people would rally behind like that, but just an example of how things blow up overnight sometimes is you can be a day one for a brand like that and then tell everybody, oh, I was in before you and I'm cool like that. You know, I knew this before you did, type of thing. But yeah, you want them to do well. You want them to be well regarded. And then at the end of the day, coming back your way, you want people to say and know that you have some kind of great taste, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think, any good or popular brand is going to have a following. That's not necessarily unexpected, whether it's, Coke or Pepsi. There's always, for some reason, there always seems to be at least two, right? Rolex, Omega. There's always like a...
Yeah, Mercedes, BMW, Ford, Chevy. It's kind of that same type of thing. We talked about this before, yeah?
Yeah, Rocky Apollo, right? I don't know. Do you ever watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
I catch a few episodes. I will be honest with you. I haven't watched much, but I have seen a few episodes.
I was big into the show when it first came out, and they recently just came back with a new season, so I just popped it on one night when I was tired. Their first episode back, they take out PPP loans, the ones for Corona relief, and so each couple members of the bar do it, and two of the guys get in an argument over. They're trying to get their country music gig off the ground with it. They get an argument over who the bigger Philly athlete is, and it's Rocky Balboa or
is it the guy from the Eagles?
No, I can't remember who it is. Oh, Donovan McNabb. That's who it is. Eagles. Donovan McNabb. It's an old Eagles quarterback, or Rocky Balboa, and they wind up calling it to a vote, and it's during the election, and so people are putting their mail-in ballots in the voting box, and they wind up submarining the election.
Oh my God.
Sorry for the spoiler out
Bro,
there.
you're yeah, you it's like, bro, you're gonna get us canceled real
It's
fast, man.
oh, but the whole episode is like how they tanked 2020, and it's really funny. It's worth the look. It's
Yeah.
worth the sidebar of me going into this tangent. But every there seems to be these dualities of always
Popular things.
popular things or two things that are in the same microcosm competing against each other. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
it's impossible to avoid that in some regards. And I find there's usually two scenarios. Either you're going to have something with high value that has a
Mhm.
strong following, or you're going to have something that's super readily accessible that has also a strong following because you have that many people that can get behind it.
Yeah.
So you either have these people that are going to be jumping on this bandwagon of something super valuable, some of who own it, some of them whom just rally behind it because it's a name, right? Like
Yeah.
how many people have, oh, I have the Ferrari horse tattoo, and you don't own a Ferrari,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's just one of those things. And so I guess either way it's somewhat unhealthy. It's kind of an unhealthy mentality to be so devoted to something that you probably don't know a lot about the inner workings of, and that doesn't necessarily reflect back on you at all, even though that seems to be sort of the idea behind this level of I don't know if it's snobbery or what, but you have this idea that this brand represents you because you either own it or own some of its apparel, or it might be from an area of the world that you live in. And I guess that's okay, but at what point do you have to look in the mirror and just say, maybe this is not the way to be? Like, this is beyond enthusiasm, and now it's getting to sort of that gatekeeping and defensiveness that we were talking about with Kelly in
Yeah.
regards to when you're just trying to enjoy whatever it is, coffee, watches, bourbon, and you just have these weirdos out there that are pushing people away, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. I mean, I think in anything you're gonna have your devotion, right? And all of the hobbies that we've talked about, especially last week with Kelly, these are hobbies where you're gonna have quote unquote experts, whether they are or not, they believe to be, and you're gonna have your fanatics, people who are like overly invested. This is their life. This is so incredibly important to them that they feel in every aspect to defend it, or to argue for it, or to promote it, or to talk about it, whatever that might be. And we certainly see that often in our hobby, which is watches, right? I mean, this is kind of where I see it the most. I'm not really into the bourbon collecting community. I'll drink bourbon all day long, but I'm not trying to go out and find rare bottles and
Right.
only sip it once a millennia. It's like I'm trying to finish the bottle. But when it comes to watches, there's certainly this aspect of fanaticism and association with brands, and we see this very strongly. I mean, you guys know where I lie. The camps and the brands that I love, and I'm not going to get into that because you already know if you listen to this podcast. But there's so many other people that are associating with this, and you said it earlier. You said Rolex. I mean, that's for me the number one brand that comes to my mind that sparks fanaticism, whether justified or not. And people love to rag on Rolex. They love to defend Rolex. I mean, it's kind of a weird phenomena, but it's something that we cannot, stay away from. It's obviously happening. So, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think they're kind of the perfect storm because I understand they're not so accessible anymore, but for a long time, you could walk in off the street and grab one, right? You could grab
100%. 100%.
models well under retail on the secondary market,
Yeah.
right? It was considered an everyman's celebratory or monumental watch, and they were out there enough that you could have enough owners to perpetuate sort of the Rolex culture. Whereas,
Yeah.
like, you have a Patek, I think not enough ownership exists for that kind of same level of enthusiasm and same level of that group arrogance where we are the Rolex owners. We're like almost
Yeah.
like
The crew.
yeah,
The
almost like the
crew.
Panaristi of Rolex. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you don't have that when you go higher up the chain, just because simply from price and accessibility, not enough people I think meet
Yeah. I mean, I think I disagree with that. And I'll tell you why. Because I think I understand your point here where you're talking about, when you have something like Rolex, right? Arguably it's more ubiquitous, right? I can get one a little bit easier in the sense that, if I wanted to pay over retail, I could buy a Rolex tomorrow and I could have it shipped to my house and I could own the watch right away. Now, if we're trying to buy stuff at retail, that's very, 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 very difficult, if not almost impossible to do these days. Don't kid yourself, ladies and gentlemen. It is very difficult. Now, I'll disagree on the point that the fanaticism doesn't change. I just think that the pool of people that are surrounding themselves with this gets smaller, right? Because I mean, I'll be honest with you. There's some people out there who the only watches that they will collect are Pateks, and
Sure.
they're adamant about that. Now, can the vast majority of us run out and buy 10 Pateks? Absolutely not, because they're extremely expensive watches. To own one would be a blessing in and of itself. To own multiple and to be a collector is an entirely another level or another echelon that I probably will never achieve, and not really something that I aspire to achieve, to be honest with you. Now, the same thing could be said for other brands, right? Vacheron, AP.
Yeah.
There's so many other brands out there that are solely driven by their demand. Go walk into an AP boutique right now and try to buy an overseas. Like it's not a thing. I'm sorry, a Royal Oak,
Yeah.
not an overseas. Yeah, it's not a thing. It's very difficult to come by these pieces and very difficult to obtain them and walk home with them. And I think a lot of that is attributed to the collectability of these pieces, the hype, if you will, the idea of the flex piece. We talked about that before on an episode. All of this is surrounding itself into this idea that, you know what, this is something that we have to collect and we have to collect it fervently. And I think before, when you were touching on the Rolex point, Rolex was able to build itself into the powerhouse that it was because it was an every man's celebratory piece.
Yeah.
That was the idea, is the fact that this was an expensive piece. I knew that it was, but it was readily available. And when I could celebrate something special in my lifetime, I could walk into my local jewelry store and buy that watch and leave with it the same day. That is not true anymore. It's very, very rare if that happens. And so I think it's interesting that Rolex as a brand is able to command this. The hype, the feverishness with which people want to own these products is still there, but the availability of the product is not. And so it's very difficult for people to get these pieces. So I'm wondering what that's going to do. How do you think that changes the conversation?
It's tough because I think it's going to limit people going forward. Like, I don't know if average Joe has the patience to say, oh yeah, I'll settle for this for now at their AD. I'll settle for this Black Bay. I'll settle for this Tag Heuer. And then I'll come back and maybe I'll get the call from my Rolex. I don't know if average Joe has that mentality. I don't know if they're just going to say, to hell with it, I'll just keep this. I'm just not going to buy.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I have the money that I could go and buy a Rolex sports model. If it was available today in the store, I could do that. Right. But I don't have the patience to play games and jump through hoops and buy other models that are less desirable for me so that I can establish purchase history. Like, that's not something that I want to have to do in order to obtain something that I may like. Right. It just, and I think maybe I'm, speaking out of turn here, but, I think I think I represent a pretty good percentage of the average person that exists in this community, in this hobby. I don't have time for it anymore. And I don't think a lot of other people that listen to this really do as well.
And being forced to purchase something almost sight unseen kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Right. Like you have to play the game and then you get the call and it's shit or get off the pot. You come down there, you try it on, and you don't know if just your euphoria is going to make it feel good or not. And then you're going to take it home and be like, well, I really don't like the way this fits anymore. And
yeah, I've heard the term the collectors call it Rolex remorse, right? Like it's the idea that you got to try it on a few times. It's been 2 or 3 years since you actually get to see it. If you're not already trying on the dummy models that don't function, right? You have very limited experience with these pieces because they are so rare. They don't sit in the showcase. They're all held in the back in the vault. So it's very hard to see these pieces in person, let alone try them on. Again, unless you have access to the exhibition models that they keep in the case lines now. And you get that call and you finally get to show up and try this piece on, and you have to make the decision. So many people are just buying it because they've been given the opportunity to make the purchase. And as you said, it's like it's shit or get off the pot. Like, I don't even know if I really love this watch because I've had very limited. Yeah, exactly. I've had very limited interaction with it, but I know it's popular. I had the opportunity to buy it, so I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger.
And if it's not, I can sell it for more than I bought it for.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And I don't know how much longer this can go on. I really don't. Because we've seen the market shifting. We've seen other brands become more popular over the last few years. And it's because a large part of it, I think, is just because brands like Rolex, you can't get their models, and people are tired of waiting, tired of jumping through hoops to make that happen. And it's insane. Again, actually, I wouldn't do it.
I think it was a Block to Watch put out an article today. I was like, is it really fair to have to wait around for like a hot watch that's like a regular production model? I don't necessarily think it is, especially when they're entry models, right? Like when Rolex first started disappearing from stores, I was at a jeweler in New York City. It was a family-owned jeweler, so it was people who were out for themselves. They're not working at a boutique or anything. And I was just having a conversation casual with the guy, and he was just talking about how the industry was changing and how not only were things hard to get, but just the whole idea around Rolex was kind of weird. Like people would come in and try to sell them to him, and he's like, listen, if you don't have box papers in English, I'm not taking this from you because I had to sell this back. Like somebody's going to want this now. And like people come in and try to sell their ladies models, and I had to tell them, well, they're not so in demand. And if they're precious metals, I can offer you the melt weight or like the diamonds, but like I really can't offer you resale. And then he got onto, well, I'll put it to you this way. When you go to Ferrari, you can't walk in a Ferrari and say, I want your top model Ferrari. They're going to laugh at you and say, you have to buy the bottom model Ferrari.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll talk in a few years about the next one up. We're not going to move you up to the top. You're not getting an Enzo or something. So I guess that kind of put it in perspective for me. And he was very brutally honest about it.
But it does. But here's the caveat to that. Nobody's buying the top models. They're buying the standard models that are just so high in demand. You cannot tell me that an Enzo is not one of the most expensive Ferraris that they make, because it is the top model or one of them, right? Yeah. So for me, that makes sense because the price is there. It's extremely rare. You have to have owned so many different Ferraris to really qualify to be considered to have an Enzo, right? It's that whole idea that I understand, because to own a Ferrari is already a special gift because it's an extremely well-built, expensive sports car, right? You're telling me I have to buy 3 Black Bays to maybe get a Submariner, or I got to buy a Milgas or something that I don't want to get a standard model in stainless steel. We're not talking platinum. We're not talking white gold. We're not talking solid anything. It's a standard model. And something like a Daytona, it's a standard model, albeit a little bit more hard to get.
Yeah.
They're still standard models. So it makes sense in his justification of what he would tell people, which again, I understand it from his perspective, but I don't understand it because we're not buying things based on price. We're buying things based on desirability. And that's a different flip of the coin. The Enzo is more expensive.
Yeah.
Right. That makes sense.
And made in much fewer number, I would assume.
Absolutely. They're extremely rare. Right. I think you have to own like 10 Ferraris of like spanning the year spectrum. So it's not like it's like you can go out and buy 10 Ferraris and get an Enzo. You have to own like, one from 95 and then one from 2000. There's like select models that you have to have owned to qualify.
I honestly have no idea about it, but he just made it out to be like a whole process. And I was like, yeah, sounds like something I don't want to get into.
It is, but these aren't just your average Ferraris. Like these are specific models because they want the Enzos to be a celebration of the client relationship with Ferrari.
Yeah.
Right. Which that aspect I can kind of see. But the other thing is too, is you're not buying a special watch. You're buying a Submariner. You're buying a Daytona. They're not special pieces. We've equated them to be, right? But it's a standard chronograph. It doesn't even have a date.
That's the
and
Stockholm
the
syndrome.
lugs,
the Stockholm syndrome of it is that you've been beaten into submission thinking that a Daytona is
it's an old movement. It's a modified version of the El Primero. It doesn't have a date. It's a 40 millimeter size, which is ancient today by modern chronograph standards. And it has asymmetrical lugs. Okay. I will continue to point this out on the podcast until I die, because everyone needs to see this. If you haven't seen this, and maybe we'll put a picture of this on the post for this episode. If you haven't seen this, go check out a ceramic Daytona and just look at the lugs, because the right side is smaller and thinner than the left side. It does not make any sense. And the only thing I can say is justification for this is like, well, we have some more visual weight with the pushers on the right side, so they made the lugs thinner. No, I'm sorry. I'm not going to spend $40,000 for a steel watch to have the lugs be different sizes on half of the case. Doesn't even make sense. It's completely ridiculous. So there you go. I hope I ruined the Daytona for you. Just kidding.
Speaking of Daytona, and I think Rolex is kind of the easy punching bag here, just simply because of the prestige attached to the name, and also, like I said, it was a very widespread watch brand at one point.
It used to be common.
Right.
It used to be common.
I mean, around my way, I mean, clients I work with, they've all got a sub, or they're steel. They're not ceramic Daytonas. They're usually steel Daytonas, but subs, Daytonas, Datejust, everybody. A lot of them aren't recent models. A lot of the subs aren't ceramic and things like that, but they all, because that's what they did. They bought their one Rolex, and this is the one I'm going to own, and that's it. When they got their bonus or whatever it was, or their big job. So I think that's why Rolex is an easy punching bag for this. But I think you can also say it on the opposite side. Like, I'm going to throw two stories out there, okay? And I'll show you both sides of it. Right? And the first story is actually one that sort of led me to end up making Brodinky, right? To sort of combat the douchebaggery that exists out there, and the overly serious nature of things, and just exactly what we're talking about, that entitlement and the feeling of superiority because of something you bought.
Okay.
Right. Something that used to make me, raise an eyebrow and sort of just shake my head. Okay. So I think, like a lot of people, and I know, like you, I used to be on the forums a lot, and it was mostly for educational purposes. It was to learn more and get more immersed in different brands, and even just the culture, the watch collecting culture, and the different little niches here and there. And so I stumble upon the opinions on Omega thread. It's still there, I'm pretty sure. It's in the Rolex forum. Okay. So you know it's going to be spicy, right? So
yeah, for sure.
So I go in there, and I just want to see what people have to say, and I know what it's going to be. It's going to be a bunch of Rolex D-bags, laying into Omega.
Yeah.
And some of it's kind of funny, and they're just like bagging on the usual Omega tropes about the moon landing and All right, I get it. Here's your cookie. But this one part of the thread just starts getting like ridiculously toxic. So there's this dude, and I'm not going to give him any shine. I still remember his name because I wanted to wring this dude's neck, and he's a New Yorker, so I could have found him. So he's just like this dude who's telling these weird stories about how when he goes to like fast food restaurants, the workers notice his watch, and they envy and they covet it. And I'm like, dude, you got some ego, man. Because like, I don't know how to tell you this. Like, nobody looks at your watch, like barely anybody, unless you're in it, you sell it, or you are into like fashion or high price things. People can't tell your Rolex from an MVMT.
The average person certainly cannot. Yeah.
So, and this dude's bagging on the French fry guy and the burger flipper, and I'm like,
What?
I guess that's cool. You want to make fun of people who don't make a good wage or are inferior to you in your mind, whatever, I guess. And so, this guy's going into how people envy his watches and you could just tell. I wouldn't even have to tell you what he owned, but cookie cutter 2018 Rolex playbook.
Yeah.
Pepsi GMT on Jubilee, Daytona, Blue
Yeah.
Datejust, Black Sub. Right? Like that's it. That's exactly what it was. It's like the most cookie cutter Rolex collection you could ever find. But so I start talking to this guy, like, and I know he's a troll and I know he's just trying to get under people's skin. And I'm like, dude, at some point you have to act like you've been there. Like that's a popular saying. I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with it, but like people usually use it a lot of times in sports, right? When like a guy scores a touchdown, hits a home run, and they like flip the bat, and people are like, dude, act like you've been there. That's usually what the better pros will say to them is, dude, act like you've been there. It's not your first home run. Like no need to showboat it out like that. Like,
yeah,
it's not your first watch. Relax. Like when you get that first watch, I understand because I think we all been there.
It's a euphoric feeling.
That first luxury watch, you're wearing it. You got, no matter, it could be 0 degrees. You got your sleeve rolled up. You are flexing that thing out there, right?
Yes.
And then by like your maybe third or fourth watch, maybe you start realizing there are times where you don't want to be flexing that out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe it's better off under the cuff, and maybe calling attention to it is both more humble and maybe a little more safe than you might have calculated when you were out there holding the thing out the window as you're driving in 0-degree weather.
Yeah. Trying to charge that loom.
Yeah. So I don't know. That story is just like a microcosm of both what that thread was about and that forum, and I guess the whole mantra of what we're talking about. It's something I don't understand necessarily. Like I understand that you made the money, and now you've also taken the steps to acquire this thing. So now you're going to flex it even harder.
Yeah.
But what's the point of trying to put other people down so you feel better?
I don't know. I've dealt with this before. I've had clients that again at the AD I used to work for, I've had clients that were like this. You would sell them something like that, and you could just tell it was a way for them to show off. Yeah, I need the gold Daytona because that's the one my colleagues will notice as my new bonus watch for the year. It's like, dude, I don't care. I don't care. It's you're a repulsive human being, and I just don't like you, so I automatically don't like you and the watch. Right? It's just, that's just the reality. It's like I don't want to treat people like that. And if somebody notices my watch, cool. I know that's probably a watch person now. We share a kinship. We share a relatability aspect here that we can talk about in the future. It's just one of those things. It's just like, I don't like to deal with people like that anymore. And that was probably partly one of the reasons why I left, the retail world. Just, again, it's in some ways a microcosm of the forums, just in real life. Nobody's hiding behind keyboards. They're saying it to your face. And it's a little bit different thing to deal with. And, just not something that in some cases can be healthy. So shout out to all my service people who are listening to this podcast.
I can't imagine.
It's I know.
I can't imagine the stuff you have to deal with in that role.
It's not all too dissimilar, I'm sure, from the food service world when it comes to dealing with people like that.
Oh, of course not.
But it's just sometimes the expectations, because you are dealing with high price items, the expectations are tenfold, right? It's a whole nother thing. We don't need to get into it here, but people like that are what make this hobby so bad, and this whole idea of gatekeeping, the whole idea is like, I own this, and if you get this, and somehow you're inferior to me, that's BS. That is 100% BS. And I have no respect for you as a collector if you are like that. It's just not the way that I think collecting should be, not the way that I think the hobby should be. We should be trying to celebrate and lift each other up and celebrate our collections and really encourage other people to fall in love with brands that we're passionate about. but do it for the right reasons. Not don't do it to be a showboat. Don't do it to make other people feel inferior or somehow that your collection is superior to them. This is about, sharing a love of virology with other people and having them find that love that you found. That for me was always, a big part of what I do. And a reason why this podcast exists is for us to share our watch collecting journey with you guys that tune in and listen to this. So
And I can't imagine being a salesperson and that this person A spends a lot of money, so you have to cater to them.
Yes.
And B, you're about to hand them over something like really cool and hard to get, and you like don't want to let it out of your grasp because you don't want them to have it.
Yeah. It's so funny that's true, because you're just like, this guy doesn't deserve this.
It is, but what are you?
It's like, but he's got the purchase history. He's got the money in hand. So it comes to that aspect where you're like, you know what? You're kind of a jerk. I really don't want you to have this, but I guess you qualify because, again, purchase history and money. So that in many ways trumps everything, which is also part of the problem with the watch industry when it comes to the retail world, right? Money does trump things. So that's a whole nother topic for another time. But
yeah, and
it's
not a burger. You can't spit in it and hand it to him. Not that I've ever done that. I've seen some wild stuff in my day, but I can proudly say I've never, no matter how big of a jerk anybody has been to me, I've never ever messed with anybody's food. So I can hang when I hang up my coat one day, I can say I never did that. But I've seen some pretty intense things that are kind of weird.
Shout out to all of our food service workers. You guys don't get enough credit. It's hard to do that job. So
now I'll give you the opposite of that guy. And I can't entirely remember the context of how I got into it with said person. But there was a person kind of it was way early in my account. I don't even know if I was posting memes at this point. But I'm getting flack from this guy, and I'm trying to figure out what his deal is, and he's pretty snarky. And I can't remember what watches we were talking about, but it was definitely something like middle tier, not crazy expensive, not crazy cheap or anything like that. And I'm trying to figure out what this dude's deal is. So I click his profile, and I see a bunch of wrist shots, and it's mostly like Casio F91.
Okay.
I'm like, okay. And then I see SKX.
God tier.
And I read the caption. It says Seiko SKX, all the watch you could ever need. Right. And so every one of these is like a little tirade about how you don't need anything beyond these basic watches. Everything else is excess. We're not going to use it anyway. But I'm like, okay, so you're like the anti-snob guy who's going to try extra hard to be low end as like sort of like the humble brag. Like I'm going to, I collect.
You're still a snob, but you're going to be a snob at everyone else who spends more money for the extra pieces, because in somehow it's perceived as excess or luxury.
Right. Like you're the minimalist Zen person, and I'm going to come at everybody above, who collects above me. And I don't know if it's because maybe you got burned by the guy I just talked about.
Yeah.
But either way, annoying. Like, cut that out. I don't need to hear that either. I respect minimalism. I see what you're doing. I can appreciate collecting from sort of that basement level. Like I could we talked about in maybe the second or third episode that I could be happy collecting in the low tier. I could Casios, Seikos, Hamiltons, Timexes. I could be perfectly happy there if I had to, no problem. Do I want to? Maybe not, but I could do it. But am I gonna come at everybody who decides that they want a Nomos or a Tudor because it's above the level I collect at, and I don't think anybody needs more than that? No. Right? No. I mean, that's consumerism is about excess, right? That's what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just weird that these people exist, right? And again, it's this idea that somehow it's almost like a holier than thou type mentality, right? Especially with the guy, on the lower end spectrum. But the same thing too with the guy on the upper echelon spectrum. It's an idea of somehow whatever I'm buying, whatever I'm doing is better than what you were doing or that you're buying, right? And it's just toxic, and I don't like it. For me, my method and what I've always told myself is if I was going to have a well balanced collection, I would have a Casio next to a Paddock. Like that would be my range. Whatever I want to collect in that range is fine. It's just whatever I want to own. And let's be honest, like I have some watches in my watch box that people would probably scoff at because like, why do you own this? You know what? It's not for you to own. It's not for you to care about. It's for me to love and me to appreciate. And that I hope extends to the rest of our listeners in our community. And I think for a large part, it does.
Yeah.
But this idea that we have to be so angry and so, toxic and just push this out there on people who frankly, they don't care to listen. There's a reason why you're rambling on the forums because nobody else wants to listen to you in real life. I mean, this is like, it's not natural conversation. Yeah, I just bought this gold Daytona and let me tell all my friends about it because, I'm just going to keep bringing it up. Like, no, dude, nobody wants to listen to that. The same way that nobody wants to read your crappy comment on the forum. But here we are talking about it 5 years later and it still resonates. But it's guys, just don't be a jerk. Watch collecting is fun. Don't make it more serious than it has to be.
Yeah, and I think it spans, I think, any consumer goods where you have
It does.
different levels of quality and you're going to have tastes come into play, right? Like that was one thing I talked about with our friend of the show, Nate. He's in cigars.
Okay.
And on our live streams, people hop on, they see him smoking and they're like, "Hey, what's a good cigar?" And his answer is perfect. He says, "Well, I'm not going to tell you what a good cigar is. A good cigar is whatever one you're enjoying the most when you're smoking it." He's like, "I'm not going to say you have to buy Padron or Monte Cristo or whatever. I'm not going to tell you you need to smoke the big brands." And again, cigars have forms. I've been there because when I wanted to learn about them, that's where I went. And it's the same nonsense. It's the same. You have to smoke Cubans only. You have to smoke the top of the chain. Like, and meanwhile, it's just not the right answer. And I like exactly what Nate said, and it resonates with me in my own career because that's what people, when they ask me, "Oh, what's a good blank? What's a good steak? What's whatever?" I'm like, it's whatever one you prepare the way you like it, and you enjoy it the most. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
And people, for example, people always, sorry for the food tangent here, but people always throw filet mignon out as like the gold standard. And I think any steak enthusiast will tell you that filet mignon is not that great because it doesn't have any fat. The texture is nice because there's no sinew.
Yeah, and it also depends on how you prepare it.
Yeah,
because you can have a really dry, crappy filet mignon, or you could have a really buttery, soft one that you can cut with a butter knife. Like, I mean, it just depends on how you prepare it.
Right, and there's different grades, but that's why a lot of times it comes with either a butter, a sauce, a crust, because it needs a little something, and that's just the dichotomy of it is that you have. I think if you get real enthusiasts, they'll usually tell you ribeye or something like that, but but they ask, "Oh, what's a good steak or what's a good meal to get when you're out?" And I'm like, "What meal do you like?" And like, what does it matter? Like, when I go out to eat, I don't get the most high price thing on the menu. I find what I actually usually find what I think the place I'm at can make the best is usually what I get. So like, I don't go to like, an Irish pub and get lasagna.
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna get fish and chips or something, or shepherd's pie.
Give me some fish and chips and an ale, buddy. Yeah, exactly.
Like, I think they're gonna hit that out of the park, and I think that kind of translates across in that regard. But without getting too far off the topic, I think that's something that people look for, especially when they don't have experience in whether it's a hobby or just an area of knowledge. They just go diving right in with what is good, what is the best, what do I need to do to validate myself to other people.
Yeah.
And I think by looking for that, you always get almost the wrong answer.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this too. A lot of, this whole idea that there's no watch collecting individualism anymore, because I think, as you said it perfectly, it's almost like we're trying to cast a wide net and pull in the most common denominator, right?
Yeah.
So for many years, the entry level watch was the SKX. Like that was the ubiquitous go anywhere, do anything type watch. It was affordable. It was a great segue into mechanical watches, and it was made by a respectable brand. How many SKXs have been sold over the years?
Gosh,
I mean, I couldn't even fathom how much money
I think
Seiko has made off of SKX.
I think even after they stopped production, it was still the stock had not run out for
Yeah,
years after. I
yeah,
think
it
it
was
just
like,
ran out.
yeah, it was like been several years before you're now finding SKX is like $500 or $480 or whatever it is because they are not available now. But you know, that was the ubiquitous model, and so for
Yeah.
so many people that were getting into the hobby, it's like, oh, this is the watch to get, right? Don't get the Orient, get the SKX, right? Don't get this watch, get this one because that's the one to get. That's the best value for money. It's a diver's watch. It does all these things. What if I didn't like that much?
What if I
But I
wanted
ended up,
hacking and hand winding?
yeah. But just my point being is like, what if I didn't like that model, but I bought it because that's what everyone told me was acceptable to get.
Yeah, and
And so yeah,
it wasn't your taste.
I'll fit into the meetup when I finally have a meetup with friends that are into watches. But I didn't get a purchase piece that actually made connection with me. I bought something because somebody else said it was good. And I think that large part of this problem is so many of us when we get into these hobbies, we try to find the safe spaces. We latch onto the things that we feel comfortable with or that other people feel comfortable with. And we end up limiting ourselves to discover things that are truly special and resonant with us because we default to these normal things, you know.
I would definitely admit that I fell into that pretty good when I
We
when I
all
first
did.
started out.
We all did.
Right, and then you get into the, oh well, you have to have a rubber strap for that. Oh, you need a NATO. Oh, you need,
Yep.
and it just goes down the from straps, watches, accessories.
It's everything, you know. It's everything. And now that's been one of the biggest challenges for me in my own collection journey. And I think you and I have talked about this now. Is I'm purposely trying to buy stuff that nobody else wants and nobody else like has, because I'm tired of my collection. Not that it really does now, but I've really wanted it to stay away from being the same that everybody else has. I don't want to have the same collection everyone else does. I want to have pieces so when somebody opens my watch box, if they ever have the opportunity to look at, they're like, dang, I've never seen this watch in person. Like, that's what I want. So then I could talk about it, tell a cool story, you know,
Even then,
because
they
it's
can look at your collection and kind of derive a bit of your personality from that.
absolutely.
Whereas if they open your box and it's the person I talked about before, cookie cutter, I bought the Rolex collection when it was still available.
Yeah.
What does it say about you? You had the money to get it, and that you probably drive like a BMW 3 Series.
Yeah.
But like there's no
yeah.
information there. There's no information there other than you have expensive
Well,
taste.
there's no originality. There's no
Right.
originality. That's what it
You
is.
could have been anybody.
You had the money, you had the means, you had the opportunity, so you did it. And again, no shame in the game. I understand it. I get it. But looking all these years on, I look at your collection, I'm like, yeah, I get it, but it's not inspiring to me. And again, nothing against anybody who has that collection.
No, it's nice.
It's just for me, it's not going to be like, oh my God, this is the most amazing collection I've ever seen. There's just a bunch of Rolex sports models. I get it. They're popular. They're collectible. They're great watches. No disputing that. But for me, if I'm gonna have a conversation with somebody that I know is a good collector, I want to see some variance. I want to see a Moser next to a Dark Side of the Moon, next to a manual wine Tissot. Like, give me some variety. That's what I want.
Not to cut you off. Did you happen to see that new Moser came out today?
I haven't. Which one was it?
I forget the name, but it's pretty cool looking. It's like a dark dial, and it just has very small dots for indices, and then it's got these cool, almost similar like the idea of like how like the Breguet hand is like hollow in the pointer.
Does it kind of look like a constellation on the dial? Like not so many dots where it could be stars, but it kind of has that feeling.
Sort of, but it's pretty nice. It's actually one of the I've never really resonated with the Moser design language, but I kind of like this one.
I think I did come across it, but I didn't know it was a Moser. I thought it was something else.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a Moser. I'm almost positive, but yeah, but I complete side tangent, but I did happen to come across one. And I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. Because I usually don't. I'm gonna be honest. I usually find them to look very Orient Bambino-y.
Interesting.
You know
Yeah,
that
I mean,
you
I
know
could see
that Gen either 3 or 4 Bambino with like the kind of Fume-ish styles.
Yeah,
That's what they look like.
Yeah, because they started copying that after Moser started making Fume dials like popular.
But like that's what I see though. I'm like,
everyone's doing
Orient
Fume
Bambino.
dials. Yeah, I mean it's true. It's like it's funny because it's like one inspired the other,
and like one is way higher quality, but
yeah, yeah. And I've held a Moser. I have a friend of mine that has I think it's the front. It's the Frontier Diver, I think is what it was. Whatever model he has was the first time Moser ever made a dive watch.
Okay.
And he was like one of the first 2 or 3 owners of this model in the entire United States, which was really cool. Like I saw this watch in person like several years ago when it first came out, but I was just like blown away by the dial texture, the movement finishing. It was an amazing watch. And again, I think he said it was like, somewhere around the 15K mark. So expensive, but not unobtainably expensive.
Yeah.
And for something like that, when you think about, now a gray market Submariner is pushing that price.
Factory made,
and it's not hand finished. You'll never see the movement. It doesn't have a Fume dot. Like
you'll like
this. There's so many things that you're just like
you'll like this. So I not to cut you off for a sec, but you'll like this. Good. I was scrolling the popular page the other day, and it's why I see this like post, and it's by one of those like enthusiasm for building wealth type pages, and it was about like branding and stuff, and it's like, we know why you pay so much for a Rolex, and like it's got a list of things and none of them actually apply. It's like totally handmade, and like I just like left like a ... in the comments, and I was like, bro, you missed the boat on this one.
Yeah, you obviously did not consult a single watch person as you made this post. Yeah,
but yeah, I know you would have found that funny. I was gonna screenshot it and send it to you, but
PSA, guys, all major watch brands are not handmade. They are hand assembled. There's a very distinct difference. And even then, to meet the demand of hundreds and thousands of units every single year, a lot of these processes are now expedited using robot technology. Shocker, I know. Okay. Hand assembled. Very key and distinctive.
Yeah, difference. Sort of like Swiss made, Swiss movement.
Yeah, the whole legal thing. Oh man, and that's funny because you know who brought that to the forefront?
Who's that?
It was Moser.
Was it?
Yes, Moser was the one brand that was like, guys, this whole Swiss made thing is kind of BS.
Yeah, it is,
because you can like have like 60% of the watch made actually in Switzerland. Somehow it counts. But, the other 40% or whatever the legal definition of what it is can be made elsewhere, which is something that's very crazy because, for us in the United States, it's a very high percentage of products that need to be assembled or made in the US to carry that logo.
Almost entirely.
Yeah. It's like 98% or 99%, something like that. It's something very high in order to have the made in the United States logo, which is crazy. But it's definitely not the way for Switzerland with the Swiss made denomination. And Moser was really upset about this, and that's why they made the made in Switzerland watch. It's the one where the case is actually made out of like Swiss cheese.
I was going to ask, didn't they make the cheese watch?
Yes,
because we should hit them up about that. Swiss cheese watch.
Just
an idea.
Moser, if you're ever listening, I don't have $15,000 for your watch, but I would happily take one.
If you'd like to make a charitable donation to the show,
But yeah, they made the Swiss. I think the slogan was like, make Swiss watch making Swiss again or something like that, or make
Okay.
it was kind of a play off like the MAGA thing. Not that
Yeah.
we're going to get into that, but it was kind of like in association with that. Make Swiss watch making Swiss again, something like that. So
Okay.
like it was crazy, but the watch was everything Swiss. So it had the dial, which was red with like a giant cross in the center for, the Switzerland flag. So the country colors. The case was made out of Swiss cheese in this like resin that they cast and they like.
But it was real cheese, though.
It was real cheese,
which is nuts.
Yeah, formaggio, guys. Like this is real cheese. And then the strap was made out of cowhide from Swiss cow. Like they went through the absolute extreme to make. I don't know if it is the world's first or the world's only like completely Swiss made watch where everything is not just like made in Switzerland. It's like made of stuff in Switzerland as well. It was kind of this like meta way to do it. And it was an ultimate flex to say, hey, you know what? There's a lot of stuff that's not actually made in Switzerland. It's carrying that denomination. So shout out to Moser for really just bringing it.
I've never, like I said, I've never been really drawn into their watches, but I enjoy their snarkiness.
Yeah, me too. I mean, the Swiss Alp watch, it looks just like the Apple Watch,
and they had the. Were they the one that had the Swiss legend?
Yes.
It was like the amalgam of all Swiss watches. Yes. Like
they got hella sued.
Yeah,
they got hella sued for that. or I don't know if they actually got physically sued, but there was like a cease and desist.
Yeah, there was a stand down, I think.
Yeah. They had like the Panerai dial with like the AP bezel, and the bezel was like a two-tone bezel, like a Pepsi.
Yeah,
and it was just like
they had like the Luminor crown guard. Yeah,
yeah, it was a giant amalgamation of like iconic watch features. These are all the watches that we're gonna have to post in the post comments.
There we go. Yeah, somebody asked us to post some references to stuff that we talk about, so this will be a good one.
Yeah, this will be a good one. We've covered a lot of distinctive things, so we'll have to make sure that we add that up there. But especially if you guys haven't seen this stuff. But Moser, I have a lot of respect for them as a company, just because they do, travel to the beat of their own drum, which I think is amazing. And they are not afraid to I wouldn't say upset people, but to make people reevaluate their thinking. I think that's kind of the way to think about it. It's like make you think about something you didn't think about before. Because I'll remember when the Swiss watch came out, I was like, why? And then I started to dig further and learn about all this kind of controversy surrounding the Swiss made logo and slogan. I was like,
it's almost like
it makes sense. Yeah, 100%. It was a way to bring shock and awe to somebody like me who didn't quite understand that. And I think that that's really, really cool. So if you want to be a fanatic about watches, go be a fanatic about Moser. They're really cool. They're really cool people. And the CEO is like an amazingly nice guy. Like he will respond to the DMs. Like he's a good dude. He's a good watch fan.
It's always nice to hear. I think it all kind of comes full circle, whether you're talking about Moser or like we were saying, talking about the SKX, and whether you're on the high end or the low end, you're going to get the people who sort of are on the soapbox, and for better or for worse, I don't think they take into account that it affects other people. Yeah. Like I think they want to say their piece and be recognized for that, and I think that's more of what it is they want to be recognized and validated. Oh, you're a collector, I get it, but they don't realize that by trying to influence other people that they might be pushing them into watches or things that they don't want.
Yeah.
Or B, maybe pushing people out of the hobby in general. Right. I mean,
the gatekeeping.
Right. Those people, they didn't make my passion stronger for the hobby. They made me want to do something about it. But
I mean, I can say the only silver lining to this, like you said, is it inspires you to be better than that, or to create a way. Or create a way to not be that. And that's how it was for me. I mean, I met a lot of people, and especially, I touched on this, when we first started this thing many, many, many episodes ago, that when I first got into this, I was hungry for information, was hungry for community. And people found out that I really didn't have anything, that, I wasn't, it was very like toxic. And they're like, you can't collect, you can't afford, why are you in this community? If you don't have anything, you're not contributing. It's like I was here to learn. And very quickly, I learned that I didn't want to be like those people, that I wanted to share my hobby with other people. And eventually I would get these pieces that I've been lusting after. And that I wanted to make it a mission of mine to be able to share that with the world and to help other people learn that it's okay. Collect what you want to collect, love what you want to love, and keep what you want in your box. That's the most fundamental thing.
Yeah, and I think that's all you can do. I think that's all you can do is just try to be above that, and hopefully you never, if you're a budding collector, you never have to experience that
It's
firsthand.
the worst.
Even though, I mean, if you go digging hard enough, you're gonna find it. Even on Instagram, it's not just YouTube, not just forums. I use YouTube as an example because one time our previous guest Kelly asked me to hop on a not even come on, but just to check out a live stream she was having, and some dude gets on there and just goes on like a tirade about how you need to have a Rolex steel model in your collection. And somebody else who also has a podcast, who's another female, actually shut him down pretty good. I'm not going to throw her out there, but it was pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
It was like that. It was like that justice porn or whatever they call that, where like people get what's coming to them. It was like, ooh,
yeah,
it was,
yeah,
good,
it was pretty brutal. That was crazy.
But yeah, so hopefully people out there won't be encountering that if you're on the starting out end, and if you're not, hopefully you've purged that from your life, because I know I didn't go back to those forums after that. I think that was my last experience with them, and I'm probably better for it.
We all are. We all are.
Right. And so that's why, when people first interact with my account, I think it kind of throws them at first, and they think I might be on the other end of things, and they're like, oh, what, like you rag on this? I'm like, no, I'm like, I'm just playing around. Like, your quartz watch, your Panerai, your whatever, it's fine. Your Hublot, who cares? You like it? Good. I like it too. Enjoy.
Yeah.
It's not like that. It's, it's for a quick laugh and then on with your day. There's nothing to stew about. Take everything at face value. Whenever I see people getting butthurt in comments, usually there's another person who's like, bro, not that serious. You'll learn that.
Take everything with a grain of salt, guys.
Yeah,
we're just here for the memes. We're here for the trolling. It's fine.
It's fine.
But we're also here to give you guys a voice and to let you know that there are other like-minded collectors that love watches just because of loving watches. That's it. And that's what fundamentally we just need to remember. And we just need to help other people find. That's it. That's all I got.
And I think that's a great way to end the show. So on that note, I think episode 14 is in the books. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Schmidt, as always, it has been a pleasure. Folks, we'll see you next time on Rich Cheese Radio.
Take care, guys.